while since I've done any sort of like talking to myself, bookstagramming, book blogging, tubing, whatever. I've kind of had a very busy, tumultuous sort of summer, and now we're heading into fall, and it is the last term of my MLIS, so I'm hoping to get it all done. I'm in 5 courses right now, which is kind of a lot, but is what it is, I guess. And the other day I was scrolling through BookTube, and I couldn't help but notice that there was a few people that are posting like their essential fall reads. A lot of them are just like books where it's like these are like any time of the year reads. Like you can look through a list and be like, oh, this is just like a bunch of like Stephen King mashed in with like whatever contemporary romance books that people have been going through in the last little bit. And I kind of was like, yeah, that's a good approach, but like I didn't really feel that these videos are very, or at least I don't really feel like they're very themed or thematic or following any sort of like, this is why this is fall, this is why this is fall going into winter, right? So I just wanted to do a brief little video in which I just kind of go and show what I would consider like quintessential fall reads and explain kind of why for each of them. These books are kind of ranging from like light and fluffy kind of fall time romance books to fantasy adventure stories to like the darker, scarier horror movies to an indigenous text that I thought was very well situated for the season. So yeah, let me just have a bit of water here and we'll jump in. So the first book I want to just mention, which is something that I think a lot of people overlook when they think about books to read during the fall, is The Fellowship of the Ring by J.R. Tolkien. And I recommend this one predominantly because it starts in late September. I believe it's September 22nd, which is Hobbit Day, which is Bilbo Baggins' birthday, which is when he brings Frodo to celebrate his 111st birthday and proceeds to tell off all the other hobbits that he doesn't like them as well as they deserve. I'm gonna biff that quote horribly. I'm not a Tolkien nerd by any stretch, but if you've been watching Rings of Power, if you've been kind of indulging a bit in the contemporary Tolkien scene, maybe it's a good time to connect with the roots and heritage of where that story comes from, because I think that there's a lot of room for a lot of room for accuracies or inaccuracies to be addressed. So yeah, Fellowship of the Ring, great fall read, fantasy exploration novel, and yeah. Next is the one that went viral on TikTok, Pumpkin Spice Cafe. I believe it was only $1.99 for a e-reader copy, versus $14.49 for a copy from Costco, which is what I went for. It's just a light, fluffy romance. There's not too much in it that's like challenging by any stretch, but it does take place in the fall. Girl inherits literally the Pumpkin Spice Cafe. It's part of a trilogy series. I have the second one, and the third one I haven't ordered yet, but I'll probably read through it. Yeah, it's just cute, fall, light, fluffy, romantic, sweet. So this is a paranormal romance, Dead Romantics, so you got some ghosties, Ashley Poston, and this book, I thought was, well, I won it in a blind date with a book contest, and was like, oh, okay, I'll give it a shot, and I read it, and ended up really enjoying it. I thought it was a really great book. Don't want to really spoil too much about it, but it deals with like a woman who's a mediator, and there's death and grieving and processing that. There were moments where I felt that the processing of grief could have been done a little better, because I feel like it was a little inaccurate in how it was shown and how quickly the main character went through it. But yeah, Dead Romantics, Ashley Poston. Next book is the fall cult classic Twilight. I actually am overdue for a reread of this myself, but this is for people who are at like a young adult reading level to like an adult reading level, especially if you want to watch the films and critique the terrible acting and direction that I'm sure that poor cast went throughout those movies. So yeah, Twilight, typical young adult vampire romance, except for the fact that the vampires are sparkly and not much vampire lore is actually followed in this. But yeah, it does take place with a back to school kind of fall vibe as you're heading through September, October. And yeah. Next is my all-time favorite book, and I don't think this will change anytime soon. It plays on the trope of young orphan boy goes back to wizarding magic school, and it's not Harry Potter because I wouldn't recommend Harry Potter right now, but yeah, Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss. How does the line go? Like, he's competing for his scholarship money, and he basically convinces the jury on the grounds of, like, if you give me, like, 10 silver now, you'll see a good student. But if you give me 25 silver, you'll see an excellent one. Like, you'll see one like you've never seen before. And he does live up to his grand narrative expectation, or at least you think he does, because Name of the Wind is a 3-part, third part still not quite yet finished, series in which we're watching Kvothe kind of grow into the King Killer. And we don't really know if he's a reliable narrator or not. So, yeah. Name of the Wind, Patrick Rothfuss. I met him when he was in Vancouver years ago. He signed my books, and he's a wonderful guy. So, don't know what's going on with him with his charity stuff that he's been having some backlash with, or like with the publications of The Doors of Stone, but I really do hope that gets sorted out soon. So continuing on that thread of September, Dark Academia, and heading back to school, we have Ava Reid's Study in Drowning. I have a lovely UK edition of it because I think the UK copies often for books are nicer. But yeah, so this book follows Effie, who is a bit of an unreliable narrator herself. She and Preston go to this manor that's falling into the sea, and they go to rebuild it, and there's all sorts of like references to like mythology and fairies and dark fae, and like mental illness is a recurring theme, madness, which all follow very much in the line of the Dark Academia tropes. So yeah, back to school, kind of fall, scary, Study in Drowning, definitely. It's also got a really sweet romance to it, if that's your vibe. This one I haven't read, but I've had recommended to me. It does follow, again, the Dark Academia Wizarding School, which is The Deadly Education by Naomi Novik. It is on my list. I can't speak too much to it because it's on my list and I haven't read it yet, and I won't speak too much to a book that I haven't read, but I do know that this does fit the essential fall readings, because it has been so heavily recommended to me by people whose opinions I trust when it comes to books. So, Naomi Novik, Deadly Education. Oh my god, I picked so many books. Okay. So, I think I'm gonna segue into, like, the darker, like, scary, like, the scarier kind of aspects of fall. So, when we get into this, I'm not going to talk about Stephen King, and I'm not going to go into his books like The Green Mile, or, like, the Dark Tower series, or ones that I think that, or Salem's Lot, books that I know that would suit very well for Halloween spooky vibes. Precisely because I think that Stephen King has made enough money, and, like, we should be supporting authors who are either, like, new on the scene or looking into, like, other books of, like, canon, and that where these trends and traditions in literature are coming from. When I recommend these are the scary books. Okay, so these are the books that are, like, might keep you up at night. So this is Slewfoot by Brom. I'm currently reading this one, and it is Salem witch trials era medieval piece where a young woman marries into a very repressive society and is told, like, you know, you obey first. You don't speak up. You keep your opinion to yourself. And story unfolds. She ends up being accused of being a witch. In a point of desperation, makes a deal with the devil, and becomes a witch. And this book then becomes this kind of like trope of, like, if you support women's rights, do you also support women's wrongs? Because it's a revenge narrative in which she takes it out on the entire town. So it's very dark. This copy, and I think most copies you get, are actually, like, so this book's creepy. It's beautifully illustrated, and it's got these lovely, like, full color illustrations, and it's just, like, quite interesting. I am trying to get into this book, but I also have, like, a million other readings and writings to do at this moment, so it's really tough for me to, like, I think this Halloween or even this year I might not hit my goals, which is fine. But yeah, it is high up there because it is really enjoyable to thumb through. But so next is the sequel to J. Kristoff's Empire of the Vampire which I read earlier this year, called Empire of the Damned. It is wonderful, and the ending of it still sticks with me as one of those books where I'm like, I want to know genuinely, like, what's gonna happen in the is it the last book in the series? I think it's only gonna be 3, and then there might be a couple spin-off duologies, but yeah, Empire of the Damned. So vampires have won. The world has been overrun with monsters and whatnot. People are kind of the minority, and there's like a chosen one narrative that's really fun, and it's very like representative of all sorts of diverse groups in society, which I think is really important. And my cat is having a fit right now. I don't know if you can hear that, which is, yeah. So yeah, Empire of the Damned, J. Kristoff. Fantastic book. This one is a little, this one's a little scary, but it's also a little comedic. Grady Hendrix, How to Sell a Haunted House. Again, we're going into horror literature, perfect for October. Kind of in the same vein as Olivia Black's work, which the title of it escapes me right now, but that one was kind of similar, where you have a realtor trying to sell a haunted house. This is kind of in that same vein. I've heard from people that have read it that they got more of a comedic read out of it rather than like pure horror, which is really cool. I actually haven't read it myself yet. It is on my list, and it is very high on my list. I had lent this copy to someone and got it back, and they really enjoyed it. So yeah, Grady Hendrix, Selling a Haunted House. Next is a piece of Indigenous fiction that I just completed recently, which I thought was really terrific, featuring the Wendigo. So this is Jessica John's Bad Cree. This is, I think, a special edition copy, but that I got around Christmas time this year, or last year. And if you're from like Pacific Northwest, Vancouver area specifically, this book will resonate with you because a lot of it starts there. And I actually read it. For anyone who's read this book, I read it while I was at a campsite on a lake about an hour from Vancouver, which very much was in vibe with the setting was. I had to stop because I was like, this is too much. But then the rest of the book takes place in Alberta. So yeah, Bad Cree, Jessica John's, fantastic read. I do have some issues with it that I could get into in another video, specifically about like how much dialogue I think the Wendigo got, but I'm also not super familiar with Wendigo stories as much as I could be, so I'm going to save those thoughts for when I've done a little more reading. Okay, and the last book I think I could, in good conscience, recommend anyone, any age, to read during the Halloween months, during the fall, maybe even November, is like one of my all-time favorite pieces of classical literature, because I think the authoress is incredibly important to where, like, the heritage and history of science fiction. I think she was an incredible feminist for the works that she did in helping women escape like domestic abuse situations during the period. Her husband is of particular note to me, Percy Shelley. Their story is one that is so fraught with complexities that I just find them, anytime I'm looking in autobiographical works and I read about the two of them, I'm just taken away because I'm like, this is so strange, but it's so Victorian. And that is, of course, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. This is, I think, the 1831. There's two different publications of the book. They have some slight discrepancies. Doesn't really matter too much which edition you pick up to read. Just read Frankenstein, or Dracula would be another good one, but I stick with Frankenstein as my main recommendation because it's so important to me. In my undergrad, I was fortunate enough to work with a professor at Simon Fraser University and study just like Frankenstein texts and look at like issues in literature and culture and read like Poor Things and Never Let Me Go and all these other works that are so heavily influenced by what Mary Shelley wrote back during the Victorian era. So I just, like, anytime someone is like, what do I read like this time of year, I'm like, well, have you read Frankenstein? Like, have you read this story about like a professor who goes mad with hubris, right? A medical student who, you know, chases after his dreams in the Arctic, and we have these questions of reliable narrator. We have these questions of what does it mean to create life, and once he's created the creature, and the creature is this thing that educates itself with like Paradise Lost and various other texts, and he's just so eloquent, but yet he's hideous. Yeah, I think it's definitely one that it earns its place in history, and Mary Shelley is a fantastic authoress who, again, I can't recommend enough. I actually just have a work of all of her shorter stories that got published, which some of them might actually be Percy's work, because I think when Percy passed away, when he drowned in the lake, she kind of took it upon herself to do a lot of posthumous publication work of his writing. I think she was burdened by a lot of guilt as to the fact that she was never really able to bear him children. There's a lot of that. I don't necessarily want to connect those two ideas together necessarily, but there was a whole bunch of reasons why Mary became very interested, or why we can speculate she became very interested in reanimation stories. And that partially has to do with the technological era of the time, where so much seemed possible, as well as her own kind of tragedy that she was going through as a woman in the Victorian era. So anyways, without that, Frankenstein, Mary Shelley, could do just a historic video on that alone. But thanks for your time. Have a great day.